In The Acolyte Episode 3, we ventured 16 years into the past to witness the tragedy that transpired on May and Osha's home planet of Brendok. However, even now, not everything adds up, and I'm pretty sure there's more to this than meets the eye.
I know.
So pull up your hooded robes and ignite your Jedi weapons as we piece together the clues that point towards a more sinister force pulling the strings from the shadows. Before we jump in, remember to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and if you want to catch more of our Star Wars videos, make sure to hit subscribe. Okay, now with all that out of the way, let's get into the true extent of the Sith's influence on the tragedy.
Help me! I got you. We must keep going.
Now, Episode 3 took us away from the show's main timeline, which is around 100 years before the prequel trilogy, even further back in time to begin filling in the twins' backstory and how it ties into the Jedi. We witnessed the events on Brendok through Osha's perspective, and I think we'll likely revisit these flashbacks in a later episode, but next time likely through May's eyes, which will also fill in a few missing details with her version of events playing out differently. Essentially, the Witch Coven were pushed out of the main part of the galaxy, and I think that's due to their use of the dark side of the Force. In this time period, the Jedi are almost like the police, with their view of the Force itself being correct, and anything that's different is likely wrong. Anyway, Mother Anastasia and Mother Coral reveal that the twins are fatherless, with Mother Coral carrying them, but their creation is down to Mother Anastasia. Now, I interpreted this as them essentially manipulating
midi-chlorians to create life.
Which is something we heard Palpatine talk to Anakin about in Revenge of the Sith. However, I want to point out here that although it sounds very close to how Anakin was conceived, it is slightly different. Anakin was conceived purely by the Force as its answer to Darth Plagueis trying to use the Force to create a dark life form himself. Now, bear this whole midichlorian manipulation thing in mind, as it does come in a bit later. So the Jedi eventually make an appearance with the intentions to take the girls for testing, with the view to bringing them into the Jedi Order. The twins themselves represent both the light and the dark sides of the Force, whilst collectively they represent balance. Now, Osha's the twin more drawn to the light side, and May's more drawn to the dark. Needless to say, as expected, Osha wanted to become a Jedi, whereas May wanted to remain part of the Coven. Her attachment to Osha mirrors that of Anakin's to Padme, in the sense that the fear of losing them essentially resulted in them being put in harm's way. Now, May proceeded to burn Osha's little notebook thing that she stole, which bear the symbol of the Jedi Order scratched into it. For me, this is one of the biggest mysteries of the episode so far, and the first clue that what we've seen here isn't totally correct. In terms of how the tragedy of Brendok transpired, the fire itself seems to spread way too quickly, as within moments the entire Witch Fortress is engulfed in flames. Now, I know the area of the fortress they're standing in here is primarily made out of wood, but have you actually tried burning wood lately? It takes me absolutely ages to get the fire pit going outside. It's not as easy as it seems. As I said, I feel there's a lot of missing information here, which is also demonstrated with Torbin's facial cuts seen right at the end of the episode. The last time we saw him in the episode, he didn't have any of them, and we know back in the main timeline he's got deep scars on his face. Thanks to some of the officially released footage, we know he got them from Kel Nuka, with the Coven potentially controlling one of them to attack the other. Now, to fully understand where I think this is all leading to, we need to look at some of the other clues. We've already spoken about the twins symbolizing both the light and the dark sides of the Force, and together representing balance, but another symbol that appears throughout most of the episode is the witch's triangles. From the architecture on the walls and doorways, to the shapes of the windows, and even the mountain the Coven's based within as well. Now, we know this Coven of witches pull from both the light and the dark sides of the Force, with themselves believing they reside somewhere within the grey. This is also seen with the moons orbiting the planet, where they seem to draw some of their power from. One moon's red for the dark side, while the other one's blue. However, the heavy use of triangles within their group actually leans more to the dark side. You see, triangles and pyramidal shapes have long been associated with the dark side, and the Sith in particular. Now, when you take into account the heavy presence of triangles within the Coven, along with the fact that they've chose to settle on a planet with two moons representing both the light and the dark side of the Force, which I will add is implied to amplify the witch's powers, as well as the presence of mysterious stone structures present on the planet as well, which look very similar to the Stonehenge seen in The Mandalorian Season 2 on Typhon, and the reflex point Balin and Shin visit on Satos in the Ahsoka show. Oh, and we can't forget the mysterious hole seen in the episode, where the witches perform some kind of ceremony in front of before the twins' ascension. I think they've actually chosen this planet to live on because it's a vergence in the Force. It's a location in the galaxy where the Force is heavily concentrated. Now, Dagobah was also a vergence in the Force, primarily down to the presence of the dark side cave there, which is known as a Force Nexus, and this is part of the reason why Yoda decided to live there in the first place after Order 66, as a convergence in the Force would go a long way in masking his own Force powers so they aren't detected by the Empire. Now, when you look at everything we've discussed about Brendok with the moons, the Force Henge, the mysterious hole and the rest of it, the witches could be here for that very reason too. But it's also possible that the Sith are there as well, especially when we go back to the heavy use of triangles. Not only would a planet being a vergence in the Force on a level we've never seen in Star Wars before go a long way in masking the witches and the possibility of the Sith's presence, but in theory it would also allow them to continue practicing the dark side whilst remaining undetected. Now, it's clear the witches felt safe in using the Force here, even with the knowledge that the Jedi were on-world, and this is likely because it was being masked by the planet. Seeing them draw power from the orbiting moons isn't the only display of the Force that points to them potentially having a deeper understanding of it than the Jedi and the Sith, but also the mysterious circumstances around how the twins came to be in existence does as well. And this is probably the most controversial event that's transpired in Star Wars since Luke ran away to Ahch-To. But yeah, in this episode it's heavily implied the twins were conceived with the use of the Force, with Mother Anastasia saying she created them. Now, I've still called it the Force in this video because they're one and the same, but the witches in Star Wars refer to it as the Thread, which is something that's also shared by the Night Sisters of Dathomir. Different Force users can interpret it in different ways and also call it different names. Now, what's particularly interesting is that the witches here talk about pulling the thread.
Pull the thread. Change everything.
And for me, when I heard that, my mind instantly went back to Palpatine telling Anakin about the ability to manipulate the midichlorians.
He had such a knowledge of the dark side.
Now, as mentioned earlier, this is different to how Anakin was conceived, but the reason he was in the first place is because the Force essentially answered back to Plagueis' attempts to manipulate the midichlorians himself. There's a bit of a misconception here where a lot of people believe Palpatine was the one to create Anakin. Now, this all stems from the Darth Vader comic book showing Palpatine doing some pretty weird stuff around Shmi Skywalker around the time she fell pregnant. However, the writers of the comics have since come out to say that this isn't what they intended this scene to represent. The Sith were aware of their failed experiment to create life, and also that the Force had bitten back to deliver the galaxy its chosen one, so perhaps he was just checking it out. The prophecy itself wasn't exclusive to the Jedi. Now, we know the Sith's attempts to create life were ultimately what brought about the Force to create Anakin, but to get to that point, the Sith would have needed to become aware of that ability in the first place in order to attempt it. The Sith have a history of looking towards other dark side Force sects as they look to expand their power. Palpatine even learnt a thing or two from the Night Sisters of Dathomir before he had them wiped out. So when we look at the events that transpire since then, I wouldn't be surprised if we learned that the Sith actually heard of this power from Mother Anastasia's coven in the first place, with the twins as living proof. And the fact that May goes on to one day become a Sith acolyte leads me to believe the Sith were actually around on Brendok as well, with them likely just not appearing in Osha's version of events, and possibly even Mother Anastasia not being aware of them either, due to both of those characters primarily pulling from the light side, I think. Now, if the Sith have been in hiding, believed to be extinct for a millennia, then you have to wonder how a young May, all on her own, managed to come into contact with him in the first place. It's possible the Sith actually knew the Coven, or observed the Coven all the way back on Brendok, and perhaps with the Jedi's arrival even played a part in the events that took place there. If the Sith were already present on the planet and they've been in hiding much longer than the witches, why wouldn't they take any steps necessary to remove the Jedi from their perfect Force haven whilst also avoiding detection, perhaps by manipulating the events that transpired there to make it look as though the Jedi took them out, leaving no witches left to observe, and the Jedi leaving. This would also explain why each side has a different recollection of the events, and why May survived, with her likely being viewed as a future Sith apprentice. Regardless of how it plays out, I'm convinced we haven't seen the full story yet, and once we do, that the Sith will be involved in one way or the other. As always, I want to hear your thoughts, theories, and wilder speculations, so drop them down in the comments. Do you think the Sith played a part in the tragedy of Brendok, or did the outcome just play into their hands? Remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and if you want to catch more of our Star Wars videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. So thanks for watching the video, I'll catch you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.